The most powerful alpha in the known world was standing in the mud of a village that did not deserve his attention, looking directly at her. Seren could not breathe. Her knees were trembling so violently she was certain they would betray her any second now. Blood rushed in her ears, drowning out the wind and the gasps and the hush that had swallowed the crowd whole. Because King Soren Ashvale, ruler of the 5 territories, the man whose name alone could empty a battlefield, had just spoken her name. Not her rank, not the Omega, not that girl. Seren. He said it like he knew her, like he had been searching for her, like finding her here, heavy with child, barefoot in the dirt with everything she owned stuffed into a sack at her feet, was exactly what he had expected, and exactly what enraged him. 300 wolves stood frozen in the village square. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The rejection ceremony had been underway for less than 10 minutes. 10 minutes of Seren standing on the stone platform while Alpha Bram declared her a disgrace to the Thornfield pack. 10 minutes of her former lover Taven refusing to meet her gaze from his place among the ranked wolves, pretending the child in her belly had nothing to do with him. 10 minutes of every person she had ever known watching her be erased. And then the thunder of hooves. The king's riders had come through the eastern gate without warning. No herald, no advance banner. Just 40 armed wolves on war horses, and a man at the front who did not need a crown to announce what he was. The raw force of his presence had hit the crowd like a physical blow. Seren had watched Alpha Bram's face drain of color, had watched the ranked wolves stumble backward off the platform like the ground beneath them had cracked open. King Soren Ashvale dismounted in one fluid motion and walked through the crowd like it was empty. Wolves parted before him, pressing back against each other, lowering their heads on instinct. He did not look at any of them. His dark gaze swept the square once, locked onto her, and never left. He stopped 3 feet from the platform, close enough that Seren could see the scar that ran along his jaw and disappeared beneath his collar. Close enough that the sheer physical weight of his authority pressed down on her shoulders like a hand made of iron. He was enormous, taller than any wolf she had ever stood near, broader across the shoulders than seemed reasonable, built like something designed to end conflicts by simply walking into the room. The gray riding cloak he wore did nothing to soften the brutality of his frame, and he was watching her with something she could not read, not pity, not curiosity. Something deeper and more dangerous that made her pulse stutter and her wolf press flat against her ribs in terrified submission. He said her name, one word, low and certain and absolute, like it was a fact he had known longer than she had been alive. Seren's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Alpha Bram recovered first, stepping forward with the practiced authority of a man accustomed to being the largest predator in any room. He was not the largest predator in this room, not by a considerable margin. "Your Majesty," Bram began, his voice steady despite the sweat visible on his temples. "This is a private pack matter. The Omega has been found unfit and is being lawfully released from our bonds. There is no need for the crown to concern itself with—" Soren's gaze shifted to Bram. Just his gaze. Nothing else moved. He did not speak. Bram stopped talking. His mouth closed with an audible click of teeth. The stillness that followed was the loudest thing Seren had ever heard. Then the king spoke, and his voice carried across the square without effort, the kind of voice that did not need volume because it had weight. "This woman is under my protection. She leaves with me. Now." Seren stared at him. The entire village stared at him. Somewhere behind her she heard a woman make a sound that might have been a gasp or might have been a prayer. She had never met this man. She had never seen him before today. She was nobody. A packless Omega carrying a child that even its father refused to claim. And the Alpha King had just spoken her name like it mattered. The ride north lasted 2 days through cold rain that never fully stopped. Seren spent most of it in a covered wagon at the center of the king's column, wedged between supply crates and a roll of canvas that smelled like pine sap. No one explained anything. The guard who helped her into the wagon had been polite enough, offering a blanket and a skin of water, but when she asked where they were going, he simply said, "The king's seat at Greyhaven, miss," and closed the canvas flap behind him. She did not see Soren again after the square. He rode at the front of the column, out of sight, out of reach, and the distance between them felt deliberate, like he had swept in, claimed her, and then decided she was not worth a second glance. That stung more than it should have. Seren pressed her back against the supply crates and rested her hands on her belly. The child shifted beneath her palms, a slow roll of movement that still startled her every time. 5 months along, and she still was not used to the reality of it. Still caught off guard by the fact that there was a whole person growing inside her who would arrive whether or not the world was ready for them. Taven's child. The thought curdled in her stomach. He had been so careful at first, so attentive. He brought her wildflowers from the ridge and kissed her in the shadow of the mill when nobody was watching. He told her she was beautiful, and she believed him because nobody had ever said it before, and she had been so desperate to believe it. When she told him about the baby, the light in his eyes went out like a candle being pinched. "You must be confused," he had said, his tone flat and rehearsed. "It was not me." She could still feel the shape of those words lodged somewhere behind her ribs, hard and sharp-edged, in a place she could not reach to pull them out. The wagon jolted over a rut in the road, and Seren pressed her hands harder against her belly. She would not think about Taven. She would not think about the 300 faces watching her be erased from existence. She would not think about how not a single person in the crowd had spoken up for her. Not one. She would think about surviving. That was enough for now. Greyhaven appeared on the morning of the second day. It rose out of the mist like something from a fever dream, a fortress carved into the shoulder of a granite cliff, its walls dark with age and weather. Towers climbed toward a sky heavy with low cloud. The gates were iron and old, scarred from sieges that Seren knew about, only from fireside stories told to frighten children. The wagon passed through the gates and stopped in a courtyard so vast it could have held the entire Thornfield village inside it. Seren climbed down on unsteady legs, her hand on her belly. A man was waiting for her. He was lean and sharp-featured, with close-cropped dark hair and the kind of stillness that suggested everything he did was deliberate. He wore no armor, just a fitted gray coat and a pin at his collar bearing the king's crest. "Miss Seren," he said. "I am Calder. I serve as the king's second and the steward of Greyhaven." He glanced at her bare feet, her threadbare dress, her single sack of possessions, and nothing in his face shifted by even a fraction. "You have been assigned quarters in the East Wing. The palace healer will attend to you this evening. If you need anything at all, you may ask any member of the household staff, and they will see to it." Seren blinked at him. "Why am I here?" Calder held her gaze for a moment that stretched just a beat too long. "Because the king brought you here." "But why?" she pressed. "I do not know him. I have never met him. He said my name like he knew me, and I have no idea how that is possible." Something shifted behind Calder's gaze, not discomfort exactly, but something close to it. A careful choosing of words. "The king's reasons are his own," Calder replied. "I would not presume to speak for them." Seren opened her mouth to push harder, but the look on his face stopped her. It was not a dismissal. It was a warning. A quiet, almost compassionate signal that said there were things she was not ready to hear yet. He led her inside. The East Wing corridors were wide and cold, lit by sconces that cast long shadows across stone walls. Her room was small but clean, with a narrow bed made up in white linen, a washstand, a window overlooking a garden she could not imagine anyone actually using, and a fire already crackling in the grate. It was the nicest room she had ever slept in. That thought hit harder than she expected, and she had to press her fingers against her eyes for a moment to stop the burning. Seren sat on the bed and tried to take stock. She was in the king's fortress. She was under his protection. She was carrying a child whose father had denied its existence, and she had no idea what any of it meant. That night she woke to a sound she could not identify. A low, grinding roar that seemed to come from the walls themselves, vibrating through the stone beneath her bed like the building was breathing. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, then stopped. Seren sat up in the dark, her heart slamming against her ribs, her hands instinctively cradling her belly. Silence. She crossed to the window and looked out into the courtyard below. Nothing. Just moonlight on wet stone and the distant shape of a guard walking his route along the wall. But there, at the far edge of the courtyard, a door she had not noticed before was open, and standing in its frame, barely visible in the shadows, was a figure she recognized by size alone. The king, gripping the doorframe with both hands, head bowed, shoulders heaving. And even from this distance, even in the dark, Seren could see that something was very, very wrong. She told herself it was not her business. For 3 days, Seren stayed in her quarters, ate the meals that were brought to her, and submitted to the gentle examination of the palace healer, a woman named Petra with steady hands and a voice that brooked no argument. The baby was healthy. Seren was undernourished but recovering. Petra prescribed iron-rich broth and extra rest and looked at Seren over the top of her spectacles like she could see straight through to the back of her skull. "You are carrying tension in your shoulders that could calcify stone," Petra observed. "Is there something you would like to discuss?" There were approximately 47 things Seren wanted to discuss, starting with why the Alpha King of the 5 territories had ridden 2 days south to collect a pregnant nobody from a village nobody cared about. But she shook her head and said, "I am fine. Thank you." Petra gave her a look that suggested she did not believe a single syllable of that statement. On the 4th morning, Seren ventured beyond her room. The east wing connected to a broader corridor that opened onto a covered walkway above the main courtyard. From there, she could see the training grounds, the stables, and a long stone building that she guessed was the Great Hall. Greyhaven was enormous and busy, a constant flow of soldiers, servants, and officials moving through its arteries with purpose. Nobody stopped her. Nobody questioned her presence. A few servants nodded politely. A guard held a door open for her without being asked. She was being treated like a guest, which made no sense because she was an Omega with no name, no pack, no standing, and no conceivable reason to be here. She found the library by accident. A high-ceilinged room lined floor to ceiling with books, warmed by a fire that someone kept fed even when the room was empty. Seren had read exactly 4 books in her life. All of them borrowed, all of them returned reluctantly. She ran her fingers along the spines and felt something loosen inside her that she had not realized was tight. She was sitting cross-legged in a window seat, 3 chapters into a history of the border wars, when the door opened and the king walked in. He stopped when he saw her. She stopped breathing when she saw him. Up close and in proper light, he was different from what she remembered. Still enormous, still radiating that suffocating physical authority, but there were cracks in the surface now that she had not noticed in the chaos of the village square. The hollows beneath his eyes were deep enough to hold shadows. His skin had a grayish pallor beneath the weathered bronze. The hand that rested on the doorframe shook slightly, a barely perceptible vibration, before he pressed it flat and stilled it by force. He looked exhausted. Not the ordinary tiredness of a man who worked too much, but something deeper. Something that had settled into the architecture of his bones. "You found the library?" he said. Seren scrambled to her feet, the book tumbling from her lap. "Your Majesty, I am sorry. I did not know this room was restricted. I was just wandering, and the door was open, and I thought—" "It is not restricted," he said, cutting through her rambling without raising his voice. "Sit." She sat. He did not. He moved to the shelf nearest the window, pulled a book without looking at it, and stood there holding it like a prop. Like he had come here for a reason that had nothing to do with reading, and was now trying to figure out how to pretend otherwise. Seren watched him from the corner of her eye. His jaw was tight. His breathing was controlled in a way that suggested control was requiring significant effort. "Your Majesty," she said quietly, "may I ask you a question?" He glanced at her. "You may." "How did you know my name?" The question landed between them like a stone dropped into still water. She watched the ripples move across his face, a flicker of something behind his gaze, a slight tightening of his grip on the book he was not reading. "I was made aware of your situation," he said. "By whom?" His jaw worked. "That is not a simple question." "It feels like a simple question," Seren replied, then immediately regretted her tone. This was the king. She was speaking to the Alpha King like he was a shopkeeper who had shortchanged her. But he did not look angry. He looked almost startled, like he was not accustomed to people pushing back. "There are things I cannot explain yet," Soren said slowly. "Not because I choose to keep them from you, but because I do not fully understand them myself." "That is not reassuring, Your Majesty." The ghost of something crossed his face. Not quite amusement. Something closer to recognition, like she had confirmed something he already suspected about her. "No," he agreed. "I suppose it is not." He replaced the book on the shelf, and she noticed his hand was unsteady again. This time, he did not try to hide it. He curled his fingers into a fist and pressed it against his thigh. "Stay in the library as long as you like," he said. "It is yours to use, whenever you wish." He left without another word. That night, Seren woke again to the sound. Not a roar this time, but something worse. A snarl that shattered the quiet so violently she nearly fell out of bed. It was raw and anguished and barely human, the sound of an animal in pain beyond the capacity of language. It was coming from below, from the king's wing. Seren threw off her covers and went to the window. The courtyard was empty, but she could see light flickering through the narrow windows of the ground floor chambers on the opposite side. And then the light went dark. The snarl came again, longer, deeper, followed by a crash that she felt through the soles of her feet. Then voices, shouting. Calder's voice sharp and commanding, rising above the rest. Then nothing. Seren stood at the window for a long time, her hands on her belly, her pulse hammering. In the morning, she found Calder in the corridor outside the great hall. His face was drawn, his gaze shadowed with a tiredness that went beyond one sleepless night. "What happened?" she asked without preamble. "Last night. I heard it." Calder studied her face for a moment. Then he gestured toward an alcove off the main corridor where they could not be overheard. "What I tell you does not leave this conversation." His tone was low and measured. "The king is unwell." Seren waited. "He suffers from a condition that the healers have not been able to treat. It has been worsening for some time now." Calder paused, choosing his words with visible care. "His wolf is consuming him. The boundary between man and beast is deteriorating. He experiences episodes where the shift begins involuntarily and he cannot stop it, cannot control it. Each episode is worse than the last." Seren's blood went cold. "How long has this been happening?" "Nearly a year." "And nobody knows?" Calder's face did not change, but the pause that followed was its own answer. Nobody could know. If the territories learned their Alpha King was losing his grip on his own wolf, the consequences would be catastrophic. Every rival alpha in every border region would smell weakness. The peace Soren had bled to build would collapse in months. "You brought me here because of this," Soren breathed, the pieces clicking together with a sickening clarity. "He did not ride south to save me out of kindness. He came because he thinks I can help." Calder held her gaze. He did not think it. He saw it. Soren frowned. "What do you mean he saw it?" "The episodes come with visions," Calder said quietly. "Fragments of things that have not happened yet. He sees faces, places, moments that mean nothing until they do." The beta paused, and something shifted in his carefully controlled manner. Something almost like pity. "He has been seeing your face for 6 months. Your name, the child you carry. He does not know why. He only knows that every vision that includes you ends differently from the ones that do not." Soren felt the floor shift beneath her feet. "Differently how?" she asked. Calder looked at her for a long time. "The ones without you," he said, "end with him dead." Soren did not sleep that night. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, Calder's words turning over and over in her mind like stones in a river. "He has been seeing your face for 6 months. The ones without you end with him dead." She pressed her hands against her belly and felt the baby shift, a slow, lazy roll beneath her ribs. "What have we gotten ourselves into?" she murmured. In the morning, she went looking for the king. She did not find him. What she found instead was a pattern. Soren was everywhere and nowhere. She caught glimpses of him across the courtyard, heard his voice echoing from behind closed doors, sensed his presence in corridors she had just entered or just left. But he never appeared directly, never sought her out, never repeated the accidental meeting in the library. He was avoiding her. Soren was certain of it. On the 3rd day, she cornered Calder. "If the king believes I can help him," she said, "why is he hiding from me?" Calder gave her the careful blankness she was beginning to recognize, the practiced mask of a man who knew far more than he was permitted to say. "The king is not hiding," Calder replied. "He is managing." "Managing what?" "Himself." That afternoon, Petra summoned Soren to the healer's wing for her weekly examination. "The baby was growing well," Petra said, measuring the swell of Soren's belly with practiced hands. Strong heartbeat. Good position. Soren was still underweight, but improving. "You are not sleeping," Petra observed, pressing 2 fingers to the pulse point at Soren's wrist. "Your heart rate is elevated. Are you anxious?" "Should I not be?" Soren asked. "I have been told the Alpha King is dying and that somehow I am supposed to prevent it, but nobody will explain how. And he will not even look at me." Petra studied her for a moment, then released her wrist. "He looks at you," she said quietly. "He watches you from the upper corridor when you walk in the garden. He asked me this morning whether you were eating enough." Something warm and confusing bloomed beneath Soren's ribs. She pushed it down. "Then why will he not talk to me?" Petra removed her spectacles and cleaned them on the edge of her sleeve. "Because the closer he gets to you, the more his wolf responds. And his wolf is the thing that is killing him." The words settled over Soren like cold water. "So, being near me makes it worse?" "Being near you makes everything more intense," Petra corrected. "The wolf calms. Yes. The episodes decrease. But the pull also strengthens. His wolf wants to claim you, and the man is terrified of what happens if the wolf gets what it wants." Soren stared at her. "Claim me?" "You are his mate," Petra said simply. "Surely you have felt it." Soren's throat closed. She had felt it. The constant awareness of him that followed her through every corridor. The ache when he was absent. The way her wolf, dormant and quiet her entire life, had begun pressing against the inside of her skin whenever he was near, straining toward him like a compass finding north. She had told herself it was gratitude, fear, proximity, anything but what it actually was. He knows? Seren managed. He has known since the first vision, Petra said. Why do you think he rode south for you himself? That evening, Seren ignored every instinct that told her to stay in her room and walked to the king's wing. The corridor was empty. The guards stationed at the far end watched her approach, but did not stop her. Calder must have cleared the way, she realized. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again, harder. Your Majesty, I know you are in there. I can hear you breathing. A long pause. Then the door opened. Soren stood in the gap, filling the frame with the sheer scale of him. He was in shirt sleeves, the laces at his throat undone, and he looked worse than the last time she had seen him. The shadows under his eyes had deepened to bruises. His hands were unsteady even in the low light. His skin had that grayish cast again, the color of something being hollowed out from the inside. You should not be here, he said. You keep saying that, Seren replied, and yet you rode 2 days through the rain to drag me out of Thornfield, so I think we are past the point of should and should not. Something flickered across his face, that ghost of recognition again, like she kept surprising him in ways he had already foreseen, but not quite believed. He stepped aside. His chambers were large and sparse, a soldier's room dressed up with a king's furnishings. A fire burned low in the grate. Maps were spread across a heavy desk, and in the corner, half hidden by shadow, deep gouges scarred the stone wall. 4 parallel lines, dragged downward, each one deep enough to hold a finger. Claw marks. Seren looked at them, then looked at him. He did not try to explain. Sit with me, she said. He frowned. Why? Because Petra says your wolf calms when I am near. And you look like you have not slept in a week. So sit with me and let me help, because you clearly cannot do this alone, and pretending otherwise is not courage, it is stubbornness. His jaw tightened. She watched the war play out across his features, the need to resist battling something deeper. Something that pulled him toward her with a force she sensed echoing in her own body. He sat. Not close. He chose a chair by the fire, putting the full width of the hearth between them. Seren took the chair opposite. They sat without speaking. The fire crackled. Minutes passed. His breathing began to change. The rigid control loosened, just slightly. His shoulders dropped half an inch. His hands went still. Seren watched it happen and felt something inside her settle in response, like 2 instruments slowly falling into tune. The baby kicked today, she said quietly, not because it was important, but because the stillness felt too fragile to leave empty. Soren's gaze shifted to her. Is that normal? At 5 months, yes. Petra says the heartbeat is strong. Something moved through his face, quick and unguarded. A flash of tenderness so raw it made her breath catch. Then it was gone, shuttered behind the mask. Good, he said. They sat until the fire burned low. Seren's eyelids grew heavy. She fought to keep them open, but warmth and exhaustion conspired against her, and at some point her head tipped sideways against the wing of the chair, and she slept. She woke in the dark, not the dark of his chambers. A different dark, deeper, colder. The air tasted of pine resin and something metallic, like blood diluted in rain. Seren stood in a forest that should not exist. The trees were enormous, ancient beyond reckoning, their trunks wider than rooms. No moonlight reached the ground. The canopy above was so dense it swallowed the sky. And somewhere ahead of her, something was growling. Not the pained snarl she had heard through the castle walls. This was different. Low and steady and patient, the sound of a predator that had all the time in the world. Seren took a step forward, her bare feet pressing into moss that was too soft, too yielding, like the ground might swallow her if she stood still too long. The growling deepened. She found him in a clearing where the trees pulled back just enough to let the darkness breathe. Soren was on his knees, and circling him, enormous and black and wrong, was a wolf. It was his wolf. She knew it the way she knew her own heartbeat. But it was distorted, swollen with something that looked like hunger and moved like malice. Its amber gaze burned in the dark, fixed on the man at its center. It was hunting him. Inside his own mind, his wolf was hunting him. Soren's head snapped up. He saw her and his face twisted with horror. "Get out!" he snarled. "Soren, get out now!" The black wolf turned its massive head toward her. Those amber eyes found hers, and it smiled. Soren gasped awake in the fire-lit chamber, her heart slamming so hard she could feel it in her teeth. The chair arms were damp where her palms had gripped the leather. Across the hearth, Soren was awake too, staring at her with a look that made her blood freeze. He knew she had been there. "What did you see?" he asked, barely above a breath. "Everything," Soren said. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The fire had collapsed to embers, casting the room in shades of deep red and shadow. Soren's heart was still racing. She could feel the ghost of that dark forest clinging to her skin like cobwebs, the cold, the wrongness, the amber gaze of the thing that wore his wolf's shape. "How long has it been like that?" she asked. Soren stood abruptly, moving to the window, putting distance between them. He pressed his forehead against the glass. "Since the Blackmore campaign," he said, his tone flat and controlled. "I lost control during the final siege. My wolf took over completely. For 3 days, I was not myself. When I came back, something had changed. The boundary between us had cracked." He paused, and she watched his reflection in the dark glass. "It has been getting worse ever since. The wolf pushes through. It wants control. And every time it takes a piece, the piece does not come back." "The visions," Soren said. "They started then too?" "The visions are the cracks," Soren replied. "When the boundary fractures, I see through to the other side. Fragments of futures. Faces. Places." His jaw tightened. "Yours." The word hung between them. "I saw you before I knew your name," he continued, still not looking at her. "Before I knew where you were. I saw a woman standing alone, and I knew with absolute certainty that she mattered, that without her, the cracks would spread until there was nothing left of me." Soren's throat burned. "And then you found out who I was. A packless Omega carrying another man's child." He turned then, and the look on his face stopped her breath. It was not disappointment. It was not disgust. It was anguish. "I found out you were being thrown away," he said, raw and unguarded, by people too blind to understand what they had. The quiet that followed was so heavy Soren could feel it pressing against her ribs. "You were there," Soren said, his tone shifting, hardening. "Just now, in the dark. You followed me in. I did not mean to. I was asleep, and then I was just there. That is exactly the problem." He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. "The bond is pulling you in. Whatever this connection is between us, it is dragging you into my wolf's domain, and that place will destroy you." "It did not destroy me tonight," Soren said firmly. "Tonight my wolf was curious. It noticed you. Next time it will not just notice. Next time it will hunt. You do not know that. I know what it does to me," Soren said, and his voice cracked on the last word. He caught himself, forced his composure back. But she had heard it. The fracture beneath the authority, the terror he kept sealed behind the mask of a king. He was afraid. Not of his wolf, of what his wolf would do to her. "Soren." Her name in his mouth did something devastating to her composure. "You carry a child. You have a future ahead of you. I will not be the thing that takes that away." "You are not a thing," she said fiercely. His hand came up, and for one shattering moment she thought he was going to touch her face. His fingers hovered an inch from her cheek. She could feel the heat of them, could see the unsteadiness running through his wrist, could sense exactly how much he wanted to close that distance. He dropped his hand. "Calder will arrange quarters for you in the South Tower," he said, every trace of warmth gone from his voice. "You will be comfortable there. Petra will continue to attend to you. You will want for nothing." Seren shook her head. "Do not do this. It is done. You are pushing me away because you are afraid, and I understand that, but you are making the wrong choice. It is my choice to make." He stepped back. The distance between them yawned open like a wound. "The South Tower is far enough from my chambers that the bond's pull should weaken. In time, it may break." "Is that what you want?" Seren demanded, her voice rising despite herself. "For it to break?" He did not answer. He walked to the door and opened it. A guard stood in the corridor beyond. "Please escort Miss Seren to the South Tower," Soren said. His words were perfectly level. His hand on the door was not. Seren stood, her legs unsteady, her vision blurring. She wanted to fight. She wanted to grab him by the shoulders and shake him until he understood that pushing her away would kill them both. But she looked at his face, at the rigid line of his jaw, at the way he refused to meet her gaze, and she recognized what she saw because she had worn it herself. Standing on that platform in Thornfield, watching Taven refuse to look at her. The face of someone who believed they were doing the right thing by letting go. She walked past him into the corridor. She did not look back. Behind her, the door closed with a sound that was quieter and more final than any slam could have been. The South Tower was beautiful. That was the cruelest part. Someone had prepared the rooms with care. Fresh flowers on the table, a stack of books from the library, including the one she had been reading when Soren walked in that first day. Warm blankets folded at the foot of a bed that was soft enough to make her weep. A window that overlooked the mountains to the south, the view stretching all the way to the distant tree line where the border territories began. It was the nicest cage she had ever been placed in. Seren sat on the bed and pressed her hands against her belly, and the tears came. Quiet at first, then harder, until she was sobbing with a force that frightened her. The baby kicked once, hard, like it was startled by the violence of her grief. "I am sorry," she breathed, curling around the swell of her stomach. "I am sorry. We are fine. We are going to be fine." She was lying. She could feel it already, the wrongness of the distance. A cold ache spreading through her bones within minutes of leaving his chambers, settling in like frost. Her wolf whined ceaselessly, pacing behind her ribs, scratching at the inside of her skin. By the second day, her hands were shaking. By the third, the migraines arrived, blinding, nauseating pressure behind her temples that left her curled on her side in the dark, with a damp cloth over her face. Petra came twice daily, her manner growing grimmer with each visit. "You need to eat," Petra said on the fourth morning, setting a bowl of broth on the bedside table. "I cannot keep anything down," Seren replied, her voice hollow. Petra sat beside her and took Seren's wrist, her fingers pressed against the pulse point, and Seren watched the healer's face tighten. "Your heart rate is dangerously elevated," Petra said. "The baby is under stress." Seren closed her eyes. "Tell him." "I have," Petra said flatly. "He will not listen. He insists the distance is necessary, that you will adjust." "And will I?" Petra was quiet for long enough that Seren opened her eyes. The healer was looking at her with something that had abandoned professional detachment entirely. "No," Petra said. "An incomplete bond does not adjust. It escalates. Your bodies are demanding proximity that your circumstances are denying. His wolf interprets the separation as a threat and responds accordingly. So does yours. What happens if it continues? For you, the pregnancy becomes high risk. Your body is already diverting resources away from itself to protect the child. Add the bond stress on top of that, and something will give. Petra paused. For him, the episodes will accelerate. Without you as an anchor, his wolf will push through faster. He was already losing the battle before you arrived. Without you, he loses it completely. Seren stared at the ceiling. He is going to let himself die rather than risk hurting me. Yes, Petra agreed. He is exactly that stupid. Under other circumstances, Seren might have laughed. Instead, she rolled onto her side and pressed her face into the pillow. How long? She asked. Before he loses control entirely? Petra considered. Weeks. Perhaps less. And me? You will survive. Probably. But the child? Petra did not finish the sentence. She did not have to. Seren heard nothing from Soren. No messages, no visits, no glimpses of him in corridors or courtyards. He had sealed himself away as completely as he had sealed her in this tower, and the gulf between them was a living thing that grew heavier every day. But she heard things from the staff. Fragments exchanged between servants who did not realize how thin the tower walls were. The king had an episode last night. Worse than before. Took 4 guards to hold him. He shifted halfway and could not come back for almost an hour. Each report was a knife sliding between her ribs. On the 5th day, Calder came to see her. He stood in the doorway of her room and looked at her with something she had never seen on his controlled face before. Something cracked. Something almost desperate. I need to tell you something, he said. About the king. About his bloodline. Seren pushed herself upright against the headboard. Every movement cost her more than it should. The Ashvale line carries a curse, Calder said. He did not sit. He spoke standing, like delivering a military report. It is not magic. It is blood. Every Ashvale alpha for 7 generations has gone feral. The wolf consumes the man. It is not a question of whether. It is a question of when. Seren's stomach dropped. Every one of them? Soren's father went feral when Soren was 11 years old, Calder continued, stripped of everything but fact. His mother had to stop him. She lost him that night. She never recovered. He paused. Soren watched it happen. He has been preparing for the same fate his entire life, training to fight it, to delay it, to hold it off longer than any Ashvale before him. And the visions? His father had them, too. Near the end. Calder's jaw worked. They are the boundary failing, the wolf seeing through the cracks. Most of his father's visions were chaos, meaningless fragments. But Soren's visions were different. His visions had a pattern. They had you. Seren's throat ached. He thinks he is destined to become a monster. That is why he will not let me close. He does not think it, Calder said quietly. He has watched it happen. He held his mother while she wept over the body of the man she loved, a man who had become something that no longer recognized her. The beta's composure fractured for just a moment. He would rather die human than risk becoming the thing his father became. Especially now. Especially with you. The words shattered something inside Seren. She understood now, completely and terribly. He was not rejecting her. He was protecting her from the ending he had been rehearsing since he was a child. A knock interrupted them. A guard, breathless and pale. My Lord Calder, the king. He is in the great hall. Something is wrong. They moved. Seren should not have been able to move at all, not with the migraines and the nausea and the weakness that had settled into her limbs like iron. But she was on her feet and out the door before Calder could stop her, her bare feet slapping against cold stone, one hand braced against her belly, her pulse hammering. The great hall was chaos, chairs overturned, a table cracked down the center. The scent of fear hung in the air so thick Seren could taste it. Courtiers pressed against the walls, their faces white, their attention fixed on the center of the room. Soren was down. His hands were braced against the stone floor, and she could see the tendons in his forearms standing rigid beneath skin that rippled with something underneath. His fingers had elongated, the nails darkening, thickening. His shoulders heaved with breaths that came out as half growls. He was shifting. Right here, in front of everyone, in the middle of the day, his wolf was tearing through him and he could not stop it. "Stay back," a guard shouted at Soren, but she was already moving. She crossed the hall. The crowd parted. She could hear Calder behind her, calling her name, but the sound was distant, drowned by the roar of the bond pulling her forward with a force she could not have resisted even if she had wanted to. She dropped to her knees in front of him. His head snapped up. His gaze was no longer entirely human. The gray had been swallowed by amber, bright and burning and wild. A snarl ripped from his throat. Involuntary, animalistic, and every person in the hall flinched backward. Soren did not flinch. She took his face in both hands. His skin was burning hot, slick with sweat, the bones shifting beneath her palms in ways that should have terrified her. "Soren." Her voice held steady despite the tears running down her face. "Come back." The amber flickered. "I am right here," she breathed. "I am not leaving. Come back to me." His hands came up, the claws retracting even as he gripped her wrists. A sound escaped him that was not a growl and not a word, but something in between. Something broken and desperate that she felt in the marrow of her bones. The shifting stopped. The rippling beneath his skin stilled. The amber receded from his gaze like a tide pulling back, leaving gray and wet and devastated in its wake. He collapsed forward against her, his forehead pressing into her shoulder, his entire body shaking. Soren wrapped her arms around his head and held him while the court watched in stunned silence. "I told you," she murmured against his hair. "You cannot do this alone." He said nothing. He just held on. They did not leave the great hall immediately. Soren stayed pressed against her shoulder for a long time, his breathing ragged and uneven. Soren held him and did not look at the court. She did not care about the court. She did not care about the overturned chairs or the cracked table or the damage she could see across the stone floor. She cared about the man in her arms and the way his heartbeat was slowly, reluctantly, finding its way back to steady. When he finally lifted his head, his gaze was gray again. Human. Exhausted beyond anything she had ever seen in a living face. "You should not have done that." The words came out wrecked. "You should stop telling me what I should and should not do," Soren replied. "You are terrible at it." A sound escaped him. Not quite a laugh. Something rawer, broken loose from a place where laughter did not usually live. Calder cleared the hall. Soren heard him doing it behind her, ushering out courtiers and guards and servants with the calm authority of a man who had been managing catastrophes long before this one. Within minutes, the vast room was empty except for the three of them. "Can you stand?" Soren asked. Soren looked at her like the question was absurd. Then he tried. His legs buckled and Soren caught him, bracing her weight against his with a stubbornness that made up for what it lacked in physics. Calder appeared on his other side without being asked. Between the two of them, they got the king to his chambers. Soren helped him to the bed. He sat on its edge, elbows on his knees, head hanging. His hands were clenched into fists to hide the shaking. "Everyone saw," he said. "Yes? They know now. What I am. What is happening to me. They know their king nearly lost control, and they know someone brought him back," Soren said, sitting beside him. "That is what they will remember." He shook his head slowly. "You do not understand. My father went feral in front of his court. It was the beginning of the end. Once they see the wolf, they never stop seeing it. Every decision I make, every order I give, they will wonder if it is the man speaking or the beast. Then let them wonder, Seren said fiercely. You are still here. You came back. Your father did not. That already makes you different. His head turned. He looked at her, really looked at her, and the defenses were gone. No mask, no authority, no king. Just a man who had been carrying something too heavy for too long and could not hold it anymore. I have been so afraid, he said, and the admission sounded like it cost him everything he had left. Seren took his hand. His fingers curled around hers immediately, instinctively, holding on like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept dissolving. I know, she said softly. I know what it feels like to believe the worst thing anyone ever said about you, to carry it so long it starts to feel like a fact. He frowned, searching her face. I was left on the steps of the Thornfield pack house as an infant, Seren said. No name, no note, no explanation. Just a baby wrapped in a blanket that nobody claimed. She swallowed hard. I spent my whole life trying to earn a place there. Being useful, being quiet, being small enough that nobody would notice I did not belong. Her voice cracked. And when Taven denied our child, when Bram stood on that platform and erased me, some part of me thought I deserved it. That this was always how it was going to end because I was never supposed to be there in the first place. Soren's grip on her hand tightened until it was almost painful. You were told you are a monster, Seren continued, her throat burning. Your whole life, you have watched the men in your bloodline become exactly that, and you decided it was inevitable. That the best you could do was delay it and die before it finished. His jaw clenched. She could feel the truth of it resonating between them. But you are not your father, Seren said. And I am not what Thornfield decided I was. We do not have to be the thing the world expects us to become. He kissed her. It was not gentle. It was desperate, aching, full of everything he had been holding back since the first vision of her face. His hand came up to cradle the back of her head, and she felt his fingers trembling against her scalp, and did not care because he was here and alive, and choosing her. She kissed him back with equal force, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer, needing the contact like oxygen. The baby. He breathed against her mouth, pulling back just enough to look down at the swell between them. The baby is fine, Seren said softly. The baby is not mine, he said, and there was something in his voice she could not identify. A question wrapped inside a confession wrapped inside a fear. Seren took his face in both hands. This child will know what it feels like to be wanted, she said. If you want us, then this child is yours. Blood does not make a father. Choosing does. Something gave way behind his gaze. The last wall. The last defense. He pulled her into him with a tenderness that undid her completely. She buried her face against his shoulder and felt the last distance between them dissolve. Not with force, not with urgency. With something quieter and more powerful, a choosing so complete it did not need words. When the mating bite came, it was mutual. The bond erupted through them both like a door being thrown open into sunlight. Seren felt it flood through her, warm and golden and absolute, weaving through every hollow place she had ever carried and filling them with something that felt, for the first time in her life, like belonging. They held each other afterward, wrapped around one another in the quiet of his room, her back against his chest, his arms circling her and the baby both. His breathing evened out, deepened, surrendered to sleep with a completeness she had never felt from him before. Seren closed her eyes. The bond hummed between them like a second heartbeat. She slept, and the dark forest found them both. The trees were waiting. Seren stood in the impossible forest, barefoot on moss that breathed beneath her feet, and felt the difference immediately. The bond. It pulsed between her and Soren like a thread of golden light, visible here in a way it was not in the waking world. She could see it stretching ahead of her into the dark between the trees, leading her forward. She followed it. The forest was different this time. The air had a weight to it, a pressure that built with every step. But Seren was not afraid. She could sense Soren through the bond, close, his awareness of her like a hand pressed against her back. She found him standing in the clearing. He was not kneeling. He was standing, his shoulders squared, his fists clenched at his sides. And across from him, the black wolf sat motionless at the tree line, watching with those burning amber eyes. It was enormous, larger than before. Its shoulders rose higher than Seren's head, and its fur moved in a wind she could not feel, rippling like dark water. It watched them with an intelligence that was not animal and not human, but something in between. "It is bigger," Seren murmured, stepping up beside Soren. "It is always bigger," he replied. His voice was steady, but she sensed his fear through the bond, a cold current running beneath the surface. "Every Ashvale before me fought it," he said. "My father fought it for 15 years. My grandfather for 12. They all lost. The wolf always wins because the wolf is patient, and the man eventually runs out of strength." The black wolf tilted its head, listening, watching. Seren studied it. Really studied it, not with the panic of her first visit, but with the clarity the bond provided. She could sense what the wolf actually was, and the realization hit her so hard she nearly staggered. "Soren," she said carefully, "when was the last time you shifted willingly?" He frowned. "What? When was the last time you chose to let the wolf out?" "Not during an episode, not during a battle, just chose to shift because you wanted to." His answer was the absence of one. "You have been fighting it your entire life," Seren said, the words spilling out low and urgent. "Your whole life, since you were 11 years old, you have been treating your own wolf like an enemy, caging it, starving it, crushing it down every time it tried to surface." The black wolf's ears tilted forward. "It is not consuming you," Seren said, and the words came from a place so deep inside her she was not sure they were entirely her own. "It is starving. You have been so afraid of becoming your father that you locked away half of yourself, and it has been clawing its way out because it is dying in there." Soren shook his head. "You did not see what my father became. The wolf is not something you negotiate with. It is not something you tame. It takes and takes until there is nothing left." "Your father fought it too," Seren said, "and his father before him. 7 generations of Ashvale alphas, and every single one of them treated their wolf like a cage they needed to keep locked. And every single one of them lost because you cannot win a war against yourself." The wolf rose to its feet. Seren felt Soren's entire body go rigid beside her, felt the surge of primal terror flood through the bond. "Look at it," she urged. "Really look at it. Not at what you are afraid it will become, at what it actually is." The wolf took a step forward, then another. Its massive head lowered, not in aggression, but in something that looked almost like exhaustion. Its amber gaze found Soren's and held. And through the bond, Seren felt what the wolf felt. Loneliness, aching, howling loneliness. Years and years of being shoved into darkness, denied, feared, hated by the very person it was born to protect. It had been screaming to be let out, and every scream had been met with more chains, more walls, more terror. It was not hunting him. It was begging him. Serene's vision blurred with tears. "It is you." The words broke apart as they left her. "It has always been you. And you have been treating it the way Thornfield treated me. Like something to be ashamed of. Something to lock away. Something that does not deserve a place." Soren's breath hitched. "I spent my whole life believing I was not worth keeping," Seren continued, tears streaming down her face. "And that belief almost killed me. It almost killed our baby. The lie we tell ourselves about what we are is more dangerous than any curse. The wolf was close now. Close enough that its heat reached her skin. Close enough to see the scars hidden beneath its dark fur. Old wounds from years of battering against the walls of its own prison. "Let it in," she said softly. "Not because it is safe. Not because you know what will happen. But because you cannot survive as half of yourself any more than I could survive as someone who believed she was nothing." The wolf stopped in front of Soren. It lowered its great head until its muzzle nearly touched the ground. A sound broke from deep inside him. Not a word. A grief sound. Gutted and ancient. He lowered himself slowly, like a man putting down a weight he had carried so long it had fused to his spine. His hand came up, unsteady, and he placed it on the wolf's head. The wolf closed its eyes. The golden light of the bond flared between them, not just between Soren and Soren, but between Soren and his wolf, two halves of the same being finally touching after a lifetime of war. The black fur beneath his hand softened. The monstrous size began to recede, shrinking, gentling, until the wolf standing before him was just a wolf. Large and powerful, but proportionate, real. Its amber gaze opened and they were not hungry. They were home. The forest dissolved. The trees melted into light. The oppressive hush broke apart into the sound of wind and birdsong, and somewhere, distantly, the steady rhythm of a heartbeat that was not just his and not just hers, but something shared. Soren woke in his arms. Soren was already awake, staring at the ceiling with a look of stunned, disbelieving wonder. Tears tracked silently down his temples into his hair. He turned to look at her, and he smiled. A real smile, unguarded and luminous and young in a way she had never seen on his face before. "I can feel him," Soren said softly. "He is quiet. He is actually quiet." Soren pressed her forehead against him and wept with relief. The curse did not end so much as it changed shape. Soren still had episodes, but they were different now. The wolf surfaced and he let it. He learned to shift on his own terms, to run the mountain paths behind Greyhaven in the early mornings, to let the beast stretch and breathe and exist without caging it. The boundary held, not through force, but through trust. The healers could not explain it. Petra tried, documenting everything with the meticulous dedication of a woman who refused to accept a miracle without a footnote. But the simple truth was this: the Ashvale curse had never been a curse at all. It was a wound passed down through generations of men who were taught to fear half of who they were. The cord adjusted, slowly, grudgingly, then with a kind of bewildered acceptance that Soren found almost funny. A packless Omega with no bloodline and no rank, mated to the Alpha King, carrying another man's child. The talk never fully stopped, but it grew quieter as the months passed, replaced by something closer to curiosity and, eventually, something that resembled respect. Soren gave birth on a cold morning in early winter, with snow falling outside the windows and a fire roaring in the grate. Soren held her hand through every contraction, his face pale, his grip crushing, looking more terrified than he ever had on a battlefield. The baby was a girl, small and furious and perfect, with lungs that announced her arrival to every corner of Greyhaven. Soren held her with the careful reverence of a man handling something infinitely precious and infinitely breakable. His hands, the same hands that had clawed stone walls and snapped swords and held together a kingdom through sheer force of will, were gentle as he cradled his daughter. "She has your stubbornness," he murmured, watching the baby's fist close around his finger. "I can already tell." Soren laughed, exhausted and radiant. "Good. She will need it." He looked at Soren then, and his gaze was clear. No shadows, no gray pallor, no unsteadiness in his hands. Just a man, whole and present, and awake. "Thank you," he said, "for refusing to leave." Seren reached up and touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw where the scar disappeared beneath his collar. "Thank you for saying my name." That night, for the first time in his life, the Alpha King of the 5 territories slept through the night with his mate beside him, his daughter in the cradle at the foot of the bed, and his wolf resting peacefully inside him. No dark forest, no amber eyes in the shadows, no war, just sleep, deep and earned and full of dreams that for once were kind.